Hey there, it's Nick, and I'm interrupting our usual intro for a bit of an update for you. For those of you who haven't been watching over on social media, you might not yet know that prior to Christmas, Warwick suffered a health event that has meant he's been out for the last couple of months, and we're not quite sure when he will be back. And so, what we've decided to do over here on the podcast to ensure that it keeps running and we keep giving you as much value as we possibly can is to share some of the podcast episodes we recorded for Tradie Wife Life. We did a fantastic series called She Says, He Says. And so we're going to be sharing that here over on the Tradies and Business podcast. And then you're also going to start to hear some episodes with just myself, Nick, or Coxie, as Woz likes to call me, and some guests so that we keep this podcast very much alive. So please sit back, enjoy the show. It's going to sound a little bit different than it has before, but I promise we'll be back to regular programming just as soon as we can. Thanks for listening.
G'day, I'm Woz.
And I'm Nick, sometimes Coxie, mostly Nick.
This is the Tradies in Business podcast, and we're here to share a bunch of tips, ideas, tactics that you can put in place to get change happening in your trade business right now.
If you're really lucky, we're going to entertain you with a few mum jokes and, more importantly, a bunch of fantastic guests that will educate you in all things you need to know about trade business. But we do promise to do it with a whole bunch of fun along the way.
I'm a self-confessed idiot, so strap yourself in and enjoy another episode.
Wow. Listeners, have I got a treat for you? You will have seen in the title that today is a different kind of episode. We're calling these ones She Says, because I am the boss. He says, because he's not the boss, but he's got an opinion that needs to be heard. And it's our opportunity to unpack the different opinions that men and women have. Because we do. We're from different planets. We don't really get one another a lot of the time. And I'm really, really lucky to have a business partner who will sit with me in some of these very difficult conversations when we don't understand one another. And the benefit to you as the listener is he's agreed to join us here on Tradie Wife Life and discuss, I guess, some of those sticking points that come up in a working relationship, particularly one with your partner. Mr. Bidwell, welcome to the show.
Do you know how hard it was for me to stay silent for that entire intro, Nicole?
Have absolutely no idea that you struggled all the way through that. And it's probably the first time ever we haven't spoken over the top of one another in an intro for a podcast episode.
Because we normally, well, it feels like sometimes we're arm wrestling to see who's going to speak first and take the lead. There's a segue for you.
There is a segue. And while you're playing over here on my podcast, you get to play by my rules. This is so much fun.
Hello, listeners, which I'm sure are not all ladies.
I don't think
But g'day to those of you who are checking in on Coxie's podcast.
We're going to today give you a bit of background and a bit of, I don't know, we're going to frame out what these new episodes are going to look like. It's our aim to do one of these each week. You'll still have the traditional Tradie Wife Life podcast every week. There are some gaps here and there because we do take some time out. It's very hard work bringing all this content to your little ears. That's presuming they are little when I look at Warwick and don't say anything. All right. So
They're my listening ears, Nicole.
You're a very good listener, Warwick.
They run in the family lineage. My 5-year-old son has scored my listening ears as well. He's growing into his ears.
He will grow into his ears. He'll be fine. We, you and I we don't differ a lot in our opinion. When we discussed this idea, we were like, well, we don't actually argue about anything because I think we have one advantage. We're not in a relationship together other than a working relationship. We don't have a romantic relationship. Thank God for that. Your turn to say the same.
I'm okay with that.
And I think that definitely helps. But we also came to the partnership with a bunch of, not rules, but agreements that we made so that you and I were able to have those robust conversations when they do come up, because we don't have disagreements and we do have different opinions at times about how things are going to land or how they relate or how our members are thinking about things or how you as a listener might take something on board. And so what we realized is we're not the only ones. You guys are all in romantic relationships generally. and then you're in business together, and that is like a hotbed for conflict if you want it to be. And so perhaps the real true idea of this show was for you, the listener, to send us in an example of something that you're finding challenging in your working relationship so that we can unpack it, because you have the advantage of Warwick's thoughts around the way the fellas are looking at this stuff, because they do look at it differently, Warwick.
We do. And I don't think I'm typical of most blokes, as Nicole laughs at me when I say that. So clearly I am. And I'm a guy. I do guy stuff. I grew up in a traditional household. My dad was very much the self-appointed leader, and I don't want to stray into social commentary, but just, in terms of roles,
Mm.
and I think that's something we'll end up talking more about in these episodes, Nick, if you say it's okay, is the roles that we either consciously fill or just unconsciously accidentally end up in without realizing it. And interestingly, because I was listening for a change instead of speaking while you were outlining these episodes earlier, the rules of the game, or the rules of the relationship that you and I agreed on at the outset, are surprisingly similar to what I know of the agreements my wife and I made before we got into a long-term, lifelong relationship. And my understanding is similar for you, Coxie. So interesting, we sort of brought that over from our own personal life into our professional life, and it works. And it works in our personal lives as well, most of the time, not all the time. I'm still a typical bloke sometimes and put my huge foot in my tiny mouth. Or is it the other way around?
I don't know.
So, yes. And I actually think I'm going to disagree with you already, Coxie. Here we go.
Oh, what a surprise.
Only the intro episode, and I already disagree with you. I think you and I actually disagree regularly. We have different opinions quite often.
Mhm.
I just think we navigate it differently to the way we have in the past with previous life and business partners.
I think we moved through it pretty quickly because it's like a
Yes.
continual conversation for us.
Yes.
It's because, the big thing here is we're both set on the same outcome. And
Yes.
because there isn't the complexity of the emotions getting in the way, and that doesn't mean that we're emotionless about the decisions or the impact that they have. We're just not taking I'm straying into some psychology here, really. We're taking a different kind of emotion into some of those conversations than if we were in a relationship together as well. So it
Yep.
just makes it very easy or easier for us to navigate through that. Also, those agreements come into play. So our agreements very much are based around always keeping the solution, the best solution for what we're doing, is at the top of the tree so that it doesn't become an argument or an argy-bargy and my feelings don't get hurt and your feelings, I think, don't get hurt most of the time,
Not
so
often.
that we can keep pushing through that conversation until we come to the right solution. And I think absolutely it would be very easy for me to say to everybody, just keep to solution-based thinking and everything will be fine. But it's not like that, because we just end up triggering one another in a romantic relationship. There's an episode coming up very soon. In fact, I think it's next week, around having challenging conversations with your partners here on Tradie Wife Life. And I think that you'll really enjoy that. It talks about a lot of, I guess, what Warwick and I will be unpacking over the next as many episodes as it takes to really get to the bottom of why do we see things so differently as we do.
I'm just staying quiet.
I like this. I think we should have started this a really, really long time ago. If you don't listen to us over on Tradies in Business, the podcast, the original podcast, we're in our 10th year over there. You really need to go and check it out. It does not sound anything like this one at all. It's very different indeed. There is a lot of talking over one another. There's a lot more of Warwick talking than there is on this show so far. This time, we'll see what happens in the future.
You should see how hard I'm clenching my fists under the desktop here, trying to stay quiet.
We did talk about getting a button so that with a hammer attached to it, so I could flick it and knock you in the knee every time you went on a diatribe. What we would like you to do, though, is give us some content to talk about. This is, we don't want it to be a one-way medium. This is about answering your questions. So if you head on over to Facebook and you search Tradie Wife Life, we have a podcast group. So you can go and jump into the group. There's a whole bunch of other like-minded tradie wives who are hanging out in there discussing these kind of problems regularly. But we'd love to hear from you. Give us some content ideas for this podcast. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us know something that's come up for you. We might have the opportunity to unpack it that allows for a bit of understanding that you wouldn't have if your partner was trying to explain it to you, or maybe we won't. But give us a go. We're pretty experienced at this stuff. We do a lot of this for our clients as well. And he's still staying quiet.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, listeners.